The fighters of the 95th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces have prevented another attack by North Korean fighters in the Kursk region of Russia. The attack of the Korean soldiers, who were moving in an open area, ignoring the drones, was prevented in a short time. What is noteworthy is that the Korean fighters dug their trenches not in a forest strip, but in an open area, in an area that drones could easily reach. As a result, the majority of the soldiers in the area were destroyed by the shells fired from the drones. It should be noted that the recent battles in Kursk show that the Korean soldiers are helpless against drones and mainly use a fighting style from the era when military technology was not developed.
Using North Korean troops in the war with Ukraine, Russia is dressing them in Russian military uniforms, while the Kremlin is betting on numbers, says Andrei Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation. As is known, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russia has already begun to use a significant number of soldiers from North Korea in assaults. According to him, the Russians are using them in operations only in Kursk region, but there is already information that North Koreans will be used in other parts of the front. Kovalenko specifies that in the assaults, the task of the Koreans is to run under the blows of our forces and take certain areas. He says that there are already losses among the DPRK military. In terms of their qualitative capabilities, they are infantrymen who practice with Soviet weapons and run forward, added the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation. He suggests that Russian propaganda will use the DPRK military as bogeymen for Ukrainian military and civilians. Kovalenko warns that one should not underestimate the enemy, but, he says, he is dying, and one should not believe in horror stories. Russia has drawn the DPRK into the war in Europe. There is no doubt that sooner or later, the DPRK will flee to NATO territory if Europe does not make qualitative changes in its attitude to threats now, and does not rely only on the US or Ukraine, noted the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation. The Wall Street Journal's chief correspondent for international affairs, Yaroslav Trofimov, writes that DPRK's involvement in the war against Ukraine has become obvious, but this is not just a war against Ukraine. The West is trapped because it is not ready for a third world war. We have fallen into a trap because the West is not ready for a third world war, the journalist notes. The author emphasizes that such dictatorial countries as Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have united against Western countries and even entered into corresponding agreements, as Moscow and Pyongyang did. According to the journalist, the war in Ukraine and conflicts in other regions are part of a global challenge, and they are linked by the interests of the beneficiaries. At the very least, Russia and China are aiming to destroy the current international order and seek to rebuild empires. In turn, Iran and the DPRK believe that the preservation of the current regimes in these countries can only be ensured in the event of the defeat of Western states. Meanwhile, the lack of unity among Western countries is working to defeat and intensify the crisis. In this article, the journalist also notes that the Kremlin regime is using nuclear blackmail against Europe, threatening to use nuclear weapons. Video footage of a mass retreat of North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region near the village of Plekovo have spread across the internet. The video published by the Telegram channel Ukraine 365 shows the disorderly flight of DPRK soldiers across snow-covered fields, accompanied by comments from Ukrainian soldiers watching the events through a drone lens. North Korean units reportedly supported the Russian army's offensive in the area. However, the attempt to attack Ukrainian positions ended in failure. The enemy encountered powerful artillery and mortar fire from the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the Ukrainian side, the North Korean troops suffered significant losses as a result of the attack. The remnants of the units began to retreat chaotically from the battlefield, abandoning some of their equipment. Ukrainian defenders continue to destroy Russian and North Korean units operating together in the Kursk region. According to the unit's commander, Robert Madyar Brovdy, one of the recent operations killed 22 soldiers, including, it is claimed, North Koreans. He showed a video of a whole row of dead bodies on his Telegram channel. Videos published from the front show special burial teams of Russians and North Koreans collecting the bodies of the dead on buggies. The corpses are piled up and the faces of the dead are covered. The enemy does not want to advertise the losses among the DPRK soldiers. According to Madyar, this is already a familiar picture on this section of the front. The Russian command, faced with massive losses, began actively using North Korean soldiers in its assault groups. However, the waves of attacks are fruitless. The Ukrainian army destroys dozens of opponents per day. The operation, which saw the elimination of a group of 22 people, was carried out by several Ukrainian units, including the 95th Airborne Assault Brigade, the 36th Marine Brigade, and the 1st and 17th Tank Brigades. According to participants, the enemy attacks followed one after another, but each ended in significant losses for Russian and North Korean troops. The use of North Korean soldiers in the Russian forces demonstrates Moscow's desperation to compensate for the lack of personnel at the front at the expense of its allies. However, these attempts only increase the scale of losses and lead to demoralization of the remaining forces. The participation of North Korean soldiers in combat operations on the Russian side has previously been discussed by experts, but there has been no clear video evidence of mass participation of DPRK fighters in the conflict zone. The video that has appeared is one of the first pieces of evidence of their involvement at the front. Experts note that North Korean units may be poorly prepared for winter conditions and have no experience fighting in such circumstances, which could also have affected the outcome of the battle.